folks. Welcome. I'm gonna give this a minute or two while the numbers climb up a little bit. I think people are just having a chance to join. Um, but welcome. Uh, I guess I'll stall a little bit with some just intro words while I wait to see as a few more people join. Um, I'm Rob Zuber, CTO of CircleCI, and today we're here to talk about I think at a high level, getting leadership buy-in. But if you break that down a little bit, all kinds of communication that we have as engineers with leaders, whether it's our engineering leaders or executives in an organization, um, there's lots of different ways that can break down, and it can feel challenging to get the results that you want, to drive to outcomes. Um, so yeah, I just want to spend some time working with you all to figure out, the things that you can change, approaches that you can take, help you with that a little bit, based on some things that I've learned in my career and in my current work. Yeah. So by means of, I guess I have an intro slide, so I'll jump to that. But by means of introduction, again, I'm Rob. I'm the CTO of CircleCI. I've been in this role for coming up on 12 years, which is an interesting point because one of the things that I often say about being in the same role for that long as a leader is you have had lots of time to live with the consequences of your decisions. When you're an IC, feedback is generally pretty quick. When you make large organizational decisions, they take a lot longer to play out. The flip side is particularly on the topic of executive communications. Um, I've been working with the same people or a lot of the same people for a really long time, and so I'm going to talk a lot about what I've found to work, um, either communicating with me for ICs or leaders in my organization, or for me communicating with other people. And then we'll talk about this specifically a little bit later, but that's my world, and my world has been consistent for a really long time. So some people some people end up working in a lot more different organizations and maybe have different exposures. So it's something to keep in mind as we talk through this. So I'm not going to read you the slide, but a couple things that I think are also worth highlighting. Um, Everyone has a boss. It's kind of a common saying that we have at CircleCI. So even as an executive, I have people that I need to work with, my peers on the executive team, who generally have very different perspectives than engineers, our CEO, our board of directors. So while it probably can seem like at some point you get past the need to uh, substantiate your decisions or to make the business case for the work that you do. It's never actually true. You always have to justify it to someone, even if it's just justifying it to yourself. And the last thing I would say is this is my first time doing a virtual workshop. I've done a bunch of in-person workshops at different lead dev conferences, which is obviously a very different environment, a little easier to talk directly to people and engage. I can't see any faces, so I'm hoping to use the chat and the polls and the Q&A as much as possible throughout this. The goal is for this to be an opportunity for you all to learn, and I want to be talking about things that are relevant to you. So Q&A will be open the full time. Feel free to drop questions at any time. I'll either try to weave in answers. If I don't get to them, I'll talk about them at the end. And we're going to do some polls along the way and some chat-based exercises to try to get you all thinking about things and then putting them out there so that others can see and share from all of your experiences. Again, I'm just one experience. So hopefully that's a good background. And as I said, this is framed as technical decisions, kind of, which can feel big. But a lot of what we'll talk about and think about and discuss today is really about communication at all levels, from the simplest thing that you might be talking about to maybe like really big formal proposals that feel like they have a lot of weight or a lot of impact in the organization. Okay. So here's a basic outline of what I want to talk through. But as I said, I'm looking for as much feedback from you all as possible in terms of directing this. So if we get into something and you want to know something else, absolutely just drop it in the chat, throw a question in the Q&A. I'm open to all kinds of feedback along the way here. So I want to talk about kind of translation in general, how engineers think and speak versus how executives think and speak, how that would apply in your organization and how to figure out what matters in your organization. And then a few tips on putting it all into practice, and leave some time at the end for additional questions and discussion if there is any. So, like as I said, a lot of this already. Everything is open for your feedback along the way. Um, and this is really like for folks who feel like they have a good sense of things that need to happen, but they struggle sometimes to make that happen. Now, a lot of what we'll be talking about here is about communication. There's really two parts to this, though, in my mind. One, yes, it's important to be able to communicate um, and express the value of things that you're thinking about. But two, it's really important to listen. The thing that you're proposing might not actually be the right thing for the organization. And by listening and sort of paying attention to signs of what's happening in the organization, the feedback that you're getting, you'll have the opportunity to figure out and then tune, right? Your goal is not always, it may never be, to get permission to do the thing you want to do. Your goal is to figure out what the most impactful thing will be for the organization and then drive that, right? So listening and taking feedback is a big part of that process. Okay. So I'm going to kick things off again in the framing of sort of proposals and getting work done with just to get a sense of everybody that's out there. I'm going to launch a poll. You all can participate and put your feedback in there and really trying to get a sense of how people feel about their ability today to get their initiative supported. So when you have a good idea, do you get support for it? Do you know how to express that to leadership so that you can get the buy-in that you need? So I'm going to launch this, and you should see a place to put some input. All right. Wow. Thank you for your quick responses. Trying to add up. Doesn't look like it's moving anymore from where I'm seeing it, but oh no, still moving a little bit. I'll give you a couple more seconds to think about it. Good spread. Good spread. Let's see. I don't think let's all right. It doesn't look like it's moving anymore. So thank you for that feedback. And then let me share. So y'all should be able to see where we're at. So nobody in the very confident category, which is fine. I think that's expected, but actually skewing towards quite confident, which is good. And I'd love to get some actually just early feedback. If anyone who's in the quite confident category has any thoughts about either what makes you confident or what drew you to come listen to a little bit more discussion about how to communicate. If you feel like you're pretty successful, what sorts of gaps are you still seeing that you are hoping to get some feedback on? Because maybe we can tailor a bit towards that. You can use the chat. Anybody who's in that category, I'll keep going a little bit, but if anyone has anything they want to say specifically about that, that would be super helpful. And then of course it goes all the way down to the the not very confident. Of course, the neutral, specifically with like I haven't really thought about it, is an interesting category because maybe after some thought you'd end up spreading out into one of the other spots. But okay, cool. So again, I'll invite you to share anything in the chat, but I'm not seeing anything yet, so I'm just gonna cruise on. If anybody has any thoughts they want to share in there on what specifically they're looking for, go for it now or as we go. All right. So to start things off, I want to talk a little bit about translation. And what I mean specifically by that is the things that we think about as engineers, as technical folks, and then what executives think about and um, how they frame their thinking, their questions, and sort of the mismatch between those two things. And I guess so. Great question in the chat. So let me comment on that super quickly, and maybe it'll come up a little bit more later. Um, the the experience. Oh goodness. All right, now there's a lot. So I'll take one and then I'll sort of like feed them in as we go. So thank you. This is awesome. Specifically like format. So the question is, I guess everyone can see it, but I'll just talk about or be clear about what I'm speaking to. My experience is that a lot of detail is expected on slides, not how I would normally create a PowerPoint or a slide deck. Um, I think my experience, and I said that I've been at the same company for a long time, but I also work with a lot of different companies and have seen other people working in other companies. So I know like it's a very, very cultural thing. And in the second section where we talk about seeing what works in your organization, it's actually a really good point that I wasn't planning to address, but I do think it's a good one. So, at the extremes, you have uh, Amazon, famous for the 6-page narrative, right? We don't use slides here at Amazon. We write narratives. I don't work at Amazon, but like that's the story that you get when you work at Amazon. And everyone sits in a meeting and reads the narrative at the beginning of the meeting to make sure that everyone is caught up and and then can have a discussion, which is a very, very different approach to uh, I'm not going to name another company, but you can think of plenty of companies that are slide forward and storytelling and pictures or great detail written out on slides. And I do think that's very culture specific. I think the clarification on that was that it was with respect to presenting to the board. I won't go into great detail about our board presentations, but we do use decks, and the technology stuff tends to be lighter than, for example, financials, right? When we talk about financials, it's often like a spreadsheet sort of screen captured onto a slide. But that's mostly because that level of detail is pretty critical there. And so I think that's to bring it up a level. Um, Narrative and storytelling versus data is a thing that you really need to understand in your organization. And again, we'll get into that a little bit in the organizational section, but knowing what works in your environment and how to support that um, is a good thing to at least be paying attention to. So, good for noticing that. I think trying to push counter to it is often not the path to success. Within your domain, you might be able to have people work a little bit more the way that you want. But then if you're presenting to stakeholders, presenting in a manner that allows them to get the information they want is usually the goal. I'm going to take a look at one more here. Yeah. Okay. So I'm looking at Albert's comment. Not confident because most of the time when I propose something, it doesn't seem to get anywhere. So that's the goal of this. Would love to get further feedback as we go. I told you all to put stuff in the chat, which is awesome. I'm not sure how I'm going to keep track of all these comments, but I'll make it work. This is amazing. Thank you so much for the feedback. All right, so let's get into some content before I spend the whole time talking about the chat. But it's all related, so I'm excited about where the questions are coming from. So one of the things that this is like a pretty basic translation layer, right? But when I witness this a lot with engineers, and I am an engineer by background. I still think like an engineer. I'm not necessarily building all the time, but it's a thing that I had to change in the way that I communicate over time, which is that as engineers, we tend to have very deep domain knowledge. And this is not specific to engineering. Other people have very specific domain knowledge in their worlds. But at an executive level, and even as a technical leader in an executive team, like my peers are not technical leaders for the most part, right? I need to think about what my peers are thinking about and what matters to the business. And then that frames how I end up thinking about problems, and therefore the disconnect when people bring them to me from within the engineering organization. And so while I understand these things on the left, architecture, reliability, performance, reducing technical debt, correctness, quality of the system, those sorts of things. What I generally am thinking about from a overall organizational perspective is on the list on the right, which is risk right? What sort of risk do we have today? And what sort of risk am I being exposed to by choosing to pursue a path? Opportunity cost, right? Which is what am I choosing not to do if I choose to do this, right? In we, I think we're at an interesting time where we all think, and in some cases it's true, we have a lot more capacity than we used to. Um, but you always have opportunity cost, meaning no matter how much capacity you have, you could always be doing something else with that capacity. And so that is a big, like when it's easy to take proposals in isolation and make them sound good, it's extremely important to be clear about what you're. Oh, I'm going to get rid of this poll first. I just realized it's still up there. Sorry. Um, Therefore, uh, it's important to present it in the context of what you're trading off, not just um, that something is is positive, right? Like the act I'm doing it versus not doing it is one thing. If I'm doing it, what am I not also not going to be able to do? Customer impact probably sounds obvious, but doesn't always come out um, in sort of any sort of communication. It's I think everything from my favorite example of this is an incident handling, right? Where there tends to be, or even how we look at dashboards and metrics, we tend to look at system metrics and lose sight of what the customer is feeling or experiencing right now. And for pretty much anyone else in the organization, that's going to be the thing that, and for your customers, that's going to be the thing that matters. And then strategic fit, right? Everyone has a bigger picture of where they're trying to go, what they're trying to achieve as an organization. Um, and if it doesn't fit into that, it's going to be less likely to succeed. And that might be true about what you're thinking of, that it doesn't fit, or it might be that you're struggling to express the fit. And so figuring out how to make that clear becomes really important. Um, a few common misconceptions designed to be a little bit lighthearted, but this is what I often see um, in sort of very technical proposals. And again, I'm thinking about things that might be bigger, right? We're trying to do a big thing, therefore we've written up some reasoning and some documentation justification. Maybe we're presenting at a meeting. Um, that's not always the case. Sometimes these things are very lightweight, just in your, in your stand up or your sprint planning or whatever it might be. I think we should work on this. I think we should work on this. It's debate between EM and PM or engineers and product managers, whatever. Um, the there's always some form of negotiation and justification happening. Um, and so, what I typically tend to see is these perspectives. Like, if I just put a lot more clarity around this, then I'll be able to get my point across. And sometimes getting into the details, first of all, particularly if it's solution oriented details, can come across as being fixated on a solution as opposed to talking about the problem. We have some guiding principles at CircleCI, and the first one is understand the problem. Like, focus on what the problem is that we're trying to solve. Look at that from a customer lens, et cetera. Once that's clear and we've agreed that it's a problem we're solving, then we're going to have a much better time discussing potential solutions to it. Um, and I also find that when you bring details to the conversation and lead with details, you end up having a conversation about details. And you, particularly if it's a technical leader who understands the details in great depth, you're going to end up talking about details before ever getting to the point. And at the end, have them say, "Oh, but we shouldn't even be solving this problem," right? And you just burn a whole bunch of time. So making sure that you start with the problem and work your way down. Um, Proposing change is a good thing, but it needs to be focused, right? Like, if everything is something that could be better, and we're always pointing out this could be different, that could be different, this could be different, without understanding this one here is where the real impact is, it starts to feel like we're not able to focus and get things done. So knowing like this is the high leverage thing that we could be changing and being clear about that, as opposed to just everything could be better, is really important. Um, Trying to create credibility through a lot of technical detail. Um, for a lot of folks, just makes it sound complicated and expensive. and clarifying and bringing up the things to the surface, I think is really important. And then last, sort of storytelling. I mean, I'm a big fan of narrative, but um, narrative can be quite concise. When we're talking about significant business impacts, it's important to be really clear up front about the problem we're trying to solve and maybe the recommendation, and then provide the detail. And then, very last, for those who are interested, this is how we got here. Um, I think the most clever version of this that I've heard is telling campfire stories, like starting at the beginning and sort of at some point we're going to get to the point where we actually talk about what the problem is. Um, and at that point, you've lost your audience. And so being really, really crisp about this is a problem, this is the impact on the business, and we have a proposal, or we're looking for the time to go figure out the proposal, um, can be really critical in that stage. I'm taking a quick look at questions. Thank you for raising them. I'm going to go backwards. So, what framing do you recommend for engineers and managers to cut through noise? I mean, a lot of these things on the, well, I guess it's not the things on the right, is the opposite of this. Let me jump ahead and see, like, the things that I think stand out, right? As for me and for many executives, and again, we'll talk a little bit about how to figure this out in your organization, because I think that, like, the context really, really matters. Um, Risk, meaning if I'm proposing something, then usually I'm looking for a proposal that's low risk, or where we have a good understanding of risk and how to mitigate it. Um, I want the opportunity cost to be low, right? Like, this needs to be the most important and most impactful thing. So if I can describe impact, then I can offset the questions of opportunity cost. Strategic fit, does it align with what we're trying to do? And then customer impact, right? What does this mean for our customers? And, like, to the point of the opposite of the campfire story, being really clear about those things up front, right? If you can establish those things, then you're going to have it's going to sit above, I guess it's described as the noise, right? Like, there's a lot of people trying to do a lot of things. I think, um, you, you could walk into any organization, look around, and say, it feels like we're probably taking on too many things, and be right. So finding something that is really high impact, that sort of sits above all of that noise, is about framing. But also, I mentioned this at the beginning, listening, right? Like, really understanding the organizational context and what matters, is going to help you get there. Um, and there's a question about capacity building. For example, advocating for projects that have limited ROI in dollars, but allow the people to build skills in a particular direction. So I say this pretty regularly. I think, when communicating, um, it the question says dollars. I'll call it currency, regardless of where you are: euros, pounds. I don't know. Pick something. Doesn't super matter. The the common denominator of investment in any organization is currency. So while you may not see an immediate return on investment from a revenue perspective, you should be able to build a case that there will be a return in dollars. And so when you talk about capacity building, building skills, et cetera, like, you have to ask yourself the question, why do we believe in that? And I can think of a couple examples. I'm sure there are better ones. I'm just trying to work the numbers a little bit. Two that come to mind would be, um, well, I guess in capacity building, right? We're building skills so that we can move faster, right? I think that's a really concrete, good example. But I want to turn that into, where is that hurting us today, right? What's the pain that we're feeling, and how are we going to shift that? And therefore, we create more features in the product down the road. We get better return from our engineers because they deliver more, whatever that might be, right? You should be able to work some numbers there. And I'm not talking down to pennies. Like, you're wrong by a lot, right? But order of magnitude, we're going to spend this much money and we expect this return, right? In terms of acceleration of development, increased capacity. That's one model that you could think about. Another model is retention, right? Engineers take time to train. It takes time to get them the context of your organization, and they're difficult to hire. The process, the work of going out and finding people and getting good fit. So if you have people who are a good fit for your organization, and who are contributing effectively but feel stalled in their growth, for example, then opportunities to build new skills, explore new projects, whatever that might be, is going to be a retention model. And you can model out the cost of replacing engineers in your organization due to attrition that was a result of them sort of stalling in their career. So ultimately, I think my answer is there are no things that don't have an ROI. The ROI might not be super positive. It might not be the biggest thing, but you can also associate risk with that, right? Again, if I take the attrition example, where people feel stalled in their growth here because we're not giving them time to learn new skills, we're going to risk attrition of those folks. Then we have to go spend a bunch of money. We lose maybe, subject matter experts, all those sorts of things. So I think you can always uh, convert those things into dollars. It might take a little bit more work, but if you can do that, and sorry, I'm using dollars generically for your currency of your choice. If you can do that, then you're going to have a much better conversation with folks in your organization that are outside of your team. I mean, even that, help your engineering leaders. That doesn't even have to be talking to finance or talking to anybody else in your organization. Like, help your engineering leaders build that case. I'm looking at one more question here that just came in, and then I will move on a little bit. I'm going to read it out loud because I don't know what you all can see. But so similar to Marcos, a lot of businesses have been struggling for revenue. Executive leadership are measured on revenue. Therefore, the question is, how much money will this make us in the next quarter? If engineering initiative ROI is realized, so they don't really care for it. Oh, I see. How do you convince a business that has become reactive? Yeah, that's definitely contextual. The question is if, sorry, I stopped reading because I wanted to make sure I digested it. Uh, if your organization has become very reactive, particularly, I think if it's quarterly revenue, in a public scenario, that's going to be the most beholden. Um, I mean, if your expectation is that your executives are going to be gone before anything pays off, um, I'm not. That's a tough one to navigate. But I do think, and we'll talk about this in a second, on the risk perspective. One of the things that I'm always looking for is risk mitigation, smaller experiments, like off ramps, the same sorts of things that we do when we think about product, right? Like, how do we do this work iteratively in small increments so that we can see the benefit of those increments? Now, mid migration, mid transition, depending on what kind of work you're talking about, can be the most expensive point. So a bunch of projects that got abandoned halfway because you decided to go do something else does not long term add up for the business. Um, but I think in that sort of scenario, a series of quick wins that are both incrementally valuable to the engineering organization. I mean, I don't know what the specific problem is, but it's the work that I do all the time, is taking those big problems and breaking them down into small problems. Quick wins give you, one, some incremental benefit of some form, and two, some momentum and credibility to then build a case for something slightly bigger, right? So if if the one thing that you're thinking about is, I don't know, we're gonna like tear down our monolith and turn it into microservices, which is the migration that everyone's been on for the last 10 years, and it's still going. Laying out a 10-year plan is not going to be the thing that's going to work in this environment. But if you can find small incremental wins within that, right? If we isolated this little piece of infrastructure, then that would be really beneficial to our customers for this reason. We have these performance issues. There's capacity constraints because no one knows how to work on this part of the system. And you do something really small, and then you prove that it had an impact, then that gives you slightly bigger windows to have. And the impact does have to come back to our ability to deliver and therefore to drive revenue. Um, that's the best that I can come up with. I think, if it's no one is willing to do anything because we just have to glue the next feature on the side tomorrow. Um, I don't know. I guess find me after it. I'm happy to try to break down the specific scenario, but that's the best that I can come up with. Is I would look for small wins, try to build some momentum and some credibility, and demonstrate how that's impacted. Right? It can't be a long, like a huge thing that in 2 years this is going to make us better at delivering, because that's not going to work for any business, even a really effective one. All right, I'm going to move along a little bit, lest I run out of time taking all the questions. But I do love the questions. Thanks, y'all. I'm going to clear some. Um, okay. So this is a little bit what we were just talking about in the concept of that question, actually. So super handy. When I talk about breaking things down into smaller pieces, one of the things that I'm always looking for, and I think everyone is looking for, in this one-way door, two-way door model, I mentioned Amazon earlier, I think was first sort of stated by Jeff Bezos or someone from Amazon. Um, when decisions or work, again, at any scale, are irreversible, they tend to get a lot of scrutiny, a lot more meetings, a lot more discussion, a lot more debate, a lot more documents get written with streams of comments on the documents that never get resolved and nobody can ever come up with an answer because it feels too scary, right? If we don't really know, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about whether or not we should do this because we don't know how to come back from it. But most two-way doors can be, or sorry, most one-way doors, meaning irreversible decisions, can be broken down into a set of reversible decisions, right? Like, what is the experiment that we can take on? What is the small piece of work that we can try that's going to give us better information and it's going to give us some incremental value, and it's going to give us better information about whether or not we should continue down this path, whether customers like this, whether it improves our work. Again, sort of like I was just describing, can we take a small piece of that? I'll use this monolith to microservices example. Can I take a small piece of that and pull it out and see the impact, right? Are we able to work more effectively? Or is there more overhead because now we're worried about, contracts between systems instead of one code base where we have everything at our fingertips, right? And so that, you could pull out a service and then say, wow, this model of a service is really terrible. It's caused all these other problems. Let's put it back in. Let's figure out a different pattern instead of, okay, everybody go off and turn all of your pieces into new services, which, if anyone has tried, is bound for failure. And so, finding ways to break those big, scary, irreversible decisions down into smaller, testable ideas is a huge piece of the process. So, I got some feedback in the chat, which I'm going to have a read of while I put up this second poll, and I want to talk about, or just get a little bit of an understanding of what is getting in folks getting in the way for people when they try to get something done, try to get buy-in for a particular initiative. And again, these can be really small, or they can be quite big. All right, launch this one. Ooh, clear winner on that one so far. All right, that looks like it's settled. Thanks for everyone who put something in there. Um, all right, wrap that one up and share it. It's pretty astounding. So that's good to see. Hopefully everyone can see that. So a little bit of ROI and budget and a whole lot of opportunity costs. There are higher priorities. Nobody with it feels too risky, which is interesting for sure. And nobody with we tried this before. Uh, that's interesting also. I guess it's the number one that people hear. So um, again, if anyone has any specific thoughts that they want to share on the higher priority, it's not super surprising. I'm going to guess, knowing what I know of many engineering organizations, that the things that are getting traded are we want to make this technical investment, but we have to deliver these features. Like the priority is product over engineering. I don't know if that's true. If people have other examples, that seems like the low hanging fruit to knock off the table. But if people have other examples of ways they're experience the priorities, that would be super valuable to throw into the chat. And then I, I'm interested as well in in any specific examples of where that's happening. And then the thing that I would say is kind of goes to the strategic fit point, but less like globally strategic. I'm going to stop sharing because I think y'all have seen this. Um, is understanding the priorities and the motivations and figuring out again on the small increment, is there something that we could do that's going to help us succeed in meeting the priorities, right? Like linking those things together, not, you know, omnibus, like just jamming things in that don't fit, but associating success with against the priorities of the organization with the types of work that you think will help you get there is an important model for framing um, the investments that you do want to make. Um, and okay, sorry, I'm just taking a look at the chat. There's a little bit off of that in terms of higher priorities, but the complexity of getting buy-in from other stakeholders is an interesting. Um, that's a really interesting one because. Oh, but I just noticed there's someone dropped in the Q and A, all of the above. So I guess I get that. Like, but the top one that's coming out is the priorities, right? Um, I think there's an opportunity in that. It's an interesting thing to understand, right? Like really understanding, okay, we need buy-in from this person, that person, that person. Like I'm willing to go get that buy-in, or maybe you're willing to go get that buy-in, right? But help me understand why that feels like it wouldn't be worth it, right? Do you not believe like what one of the hidden signals in there might be, I don't actually believe in this. I'm not willing to go fight for this. So help me understand why that would be the case, right? Or those people, we're not going to be able to convince them, even though I believe in it. That's a different story, right? Like, so trying to understand that, to understand a little bit more about the dynamics of your organization, I think would be really um, valuable. Okay. I'm going to start moving a little bit faster, I think. So, this is an example that is admittedly a bit contrived, but actually not far off of some things that I've read in terms of a written technical proposal. And what I wanted you all to take a look at is just where in this do you lose interest and feel like you're not really sure what we're trying to achieve. And you can drop in the chat like at this point, just say like this is where I stop. This is this sentence, this paragraph, whatever. I'll give you a couple minutes or maybe a minute to read it and throw in some comments. Yeah, admittedly, to Marco's point, this is hard. I mean, I had a hard time reading it. This was sort of fabricated, and a little more extreme than some of the things that I've read, um, but not that far off in the sense that there's a lot of technical detail without getting to certainly without starting with a clear point, and without getting to a clear point. Um, so I want to do, yeah, yes, yes. I will. I don't have a, an internal example that I'd be willing to use. So it took some effort to, or some took the minimum effort path to create, the most obfuscated sort of description. But now I'd like you to change your thinking. And some people sort of did this a little bit already, but I'm going to put it back up on the screen and ask yourself the question, how would you convey the intent in a way that you think um, would land better, that would start to get your point across? Like what would you focus on, um, to try and, again, assume that you're in an organization that's going to use a written proposal for the purpose of this, but it could be framed verbally or any other way. All right, great. Some very good suggestions there now. Thank you. Definitely just shorter, non-technical. Um, right. There's a bunch of comments about latency, timing, etc. Most people, as has been commented here, even technical leaders without having to sit down and go through the system aren't going to really understand what the impact is. So, like, how does that impact our customer? How does that impact our revenue? You should be able to link those things together. We talk about, or use terms like business impact, but I mean, I would say I said earlier, currency is the common denominator, right? So you want to get to the point of customer impact, which might be churn, frustration, time we're spending talking to those customers. Um, could be SLA violations where we're paying them, whatever that might be. Um, it could be, depending on your business, failed checkouts, that sort of thing. Um, and really trying to tie that back. And then, well, I guess we'll get into the structure in a little bit. So let me jump ahead. But how you would then turn that into a proposal is going to be what comes next. So quick wrap up. Even your engineering executives want you to put things in business terms because that helps them put things in business terms. There was, um, comment somewhere, up further above, when we were talking about confidence. Someone said they were confident with their work for their own team and getting buy-in for that, but trying to get their boss to sort of bring other teams into something was harder. And I think a huge amount of that is helping them frame impact to the business, right? Because someone's going to ask them why they're choosing to do things, and if they have that framed in the right way already, then they don't have to do as much work. Makes it easier to get them to buy in and say yes. Um, you know, these 4 points: risk, opportunity, cost, customer impact, strategic fit, and breaking things down into smaller iterations that we can test as a hypothesis instead of having to go all in, is always going to help get things moving along. All right. So I've said this a couple times. I've been at CircleCI a long time. I have worked at many other places, but this is my experience. Your organization might be different. There was a great question about slides and kind of, how communications are formatted. All of these things matter. And while it's helpful to, to have some frameworks, it's also extremely important to know what you're trying to get done in your particular organization and what works. So, I think I pretty much said this already. I'm just going to jump on to the next one. I want to talk a little bit about reading the room. I use this expression a lot, and it might be like specific rooms, quote unquote, in your organization, like different teams, different departments have different ways of thinking and working. It's situational awareness and context. But just if we go up to the higher level of your organization in general, knowing how things get done and who does succeed in your organization is extremely valuable. Part of that, I think, I think the easy way to write that off is everything is political and, people who have favor get things done. But I think if you take a little bit more time and give it a little bit more of a generous definition, you'll witness specific behaviors that tend to be more successful, and looking for those is going to give you a clue to how to think about applying these things again in your organization versus my organization. Um, who gets the things that they're looking for? Is it the loudest person? Is it someone who brings a lot of charts and graphs and a lot of data and technical detail? I mean, we sort of just talked about how the technical detail is not where you want to frame, but maybe a lot of substantiation in data is going to get you a better result than what sort of seems like feelings. Who specifically, like what, again, you can look at their specific like communication style. What do they do? Like what work do they do outside the room? Um, yeah. To the next point, are decisions made in meetings or are they made before meetings? And I think it's generally true that if you're trying to get what you need in a big formal meeting structure, you've probably already lost. You want to walk into that room knowing that you have all the support and the buy-in that you need, and it's an opportunity to clear up any issues. Um, and then, are you in a speedy organization or a cautious organization? Right? There was a great question earlier that I was responding to about the nature of the business right now. Like, are we revenue driven right now? I mean, most organizations are revenue driven, but are we reactively revenue driven? Are we trying to compensate for something? Or are we in a position where we're getting good natural revenue growth and this is a time where we can make bigger investments, right? Like what what case am I trying to make even in this particular business cycle of my business, let alone the organization that I'm in compared to other organizations? Um, so I'm going to throw this up just as a quick poll to get some interest or like some perspective, I guess is probably a better way of describing it, of just how you feel your organization uh, functions today. All right, I'll give it a couple more seconds, but the all of the above choice might have been a mistake. There's a lot of nuance in this, so there's a lot of leaning towards. I'll wrap it up there and share. Most people came in with it's a bit of everything. I think, that's absolutely valid. Oh, there's a specific example though. It's like it's not all the things, but we're a cautious organization and relationships matter. I was sort of laughing to myself about how low the relationship number was, because I think that's a thing that engineers think about differently than um, many other disciplines, and we'll come back to that in a few minutes. But okay, so data, speed. I mean, a little bit of the others. I guess in um, the example of combination of caution. So there was one vote, a half a vote for caution. Not a lot of caution right now. I think that might be market related, right? Everyone is feeling a sense of urgency, a sense that someone around them is going faster than them. And so the slow, cautious model might not be the right thing right now. Um, and then let's see. Oh, I see. Yeah. Um, if I understand, oh, I don't know if everyone can see this, but if I understand the last comment, be a great outside perspective. So that's absolutely it's a great point. You can be a little too close to your own organization. I made the comment about politics earlier to just feel like I don't even know how anything gets done around here. It doesn't make sense. It's always these people, but that doesn't make sense. Finding out from someone else who maybe has witnessed, or just getting other perspectives inside your organization, but also getting them outside the organization, um, is usually a really good um, eye opener. Um, if you there's scenarios where that would happen for sure. Over time, we've had a few different people come into our organization to help us out with things and sort of play back stuff that was surprising to me. So it definitely happens. Um, I think I got a little bit of this already in comments, but if anybody else wants to add something, really the point of this was to have you think about it for yourself. So maybe because there was so much, and thanks Marco for leading the charge, but because there was so much combination, if anybody wants to put in like it's this and this, it's this and this, like these are kind of the two or three factors as opposed to it's just some combination. I think that would be helpful to get a broader perspective, but really the goal is to have you think about it so you can think about how to take on your next conversation. I'm gonna keep rolling on while you do that. Fair enough. Although I mean, a very serious question. I feel like, sorry for anyone who doesn't see Andrew's comment that anything with AOI in it will get approved. I think that was 2025, and 2026 is becoming the year of measuring AI. It's probably on a spectrum across different organizations, but meaning, okay, we spent all this money and what are we getting for it? Like, are we actually making use of it? Do we need to optimize, et cetera, et cetera? And so there's a little bit more of a metric orientation around AI usage, depending on, again, where you are in that cycle. I'm curious if that lands for anybody else. So we're definitely doing more justification, and I get that feedback from other engineering leaders. Okay. So again, overall ideas, a rough sketch, understanding your organization is really key. You can think about it in these categories, but as I said, looking at who's succeeding in your organization and being honest with yourself about why you think that is, what tactics they're taking, what approaches, how they communicate, how they structure their thinking, who they talk to. There was some comment about one-on-one relationships. So, like, what relationships do you need to build in your organization, which is something that we're going to get to in a second. So here we go. Um, yeah, thank you. So the influence map. This always when I talk about engineers versus other disciplines, the way that I think about this the most, or the thing that really flagged this for me, let's say, was sales folks, whether they're leaders, individual sellers, etc. Earlier in my career and still, I spent a lot of time with customers as a technical representative, right? I work at CircleCI. We sell a very technical product, so I spend time with customers. And when I, I think early in my career, I was always surprised when I would talk to a salesperson and ask them what I might need to know about the account that we were going to meet. And what I generally got as a response was an org chart. Not like necessarily a picture, sometimes a picture, but a list of names and roles and who was an influencer and who was a champion and who was the decision maker in the organization. Now, this is you thinking about this from the perspective of selling a product into an organization, but I read a great book actually in the last couple of years called "Everybody's in Sales" or "To Sell is Human" or so. I forget the name of it anyway. Something like that. Basically describing the fact that everybody's job is sales in some form. Like it's and talk about negotiation and sales, like that's what, when we talk about communication, particularly lobbying for work to get done, lobbying for space for your teams to learn and grow skills, like whatever that might be, you're selling. And understanding relationships in your organization, understanding who has influence, understanding um, how how those people think is a super valuable exercise um, in figuring out how to navigate your organization and how to create your own influence, right? And again, I'll keep saying it's also important to listen, right? Because the thing that you're thinking about might not line up with the strategic goals. You might just learn something that will reshape how you think about what the problems are. There's a great scene in the Phoenix Project, if anyone has read it, where I think the IT team goes to meet the COO or the CFO and just says, "Tell us how you think about the business. Like, how do you frame your view of what matters?" And they come away with a super dense understanding of what they could be doing that would really shape and drive the business effectively, right? So it's not just going to them and saying, I want to get this done, but really understanding how they think about the problem would give you new ideas about how you can pursue things. So these are some examples. Try not to put like titles or whatever on them, um, because it's not like the budget owner could be someone in finance. It could be your boss, right? And they might have specific things that they're trying to, lay that out for or apply it to. But knowing that there are particular skeptics in the organization, some people are just skeptical of everything. Um, and they carry weight or they don't, knowing that and knowing what drives that in a way that you can prepare yourself for it, that you can speak to them outside of the room. I keep using the room as if there's always a big meeting. It doesn't have to be that way, but um, to get their input, right? Like I think a lot of people have different personas publicly, meaning in large groups, than they do in person. And spending real time with people in person is a great way to figure out how your organization functions and how to get, your ideas across better. And one thing that I would highlight in that, and this is, I've been thinking about this since my, solo engineering days. Um, Thought balloons are really cheap. And what I mean by a thought balloon is just like floating an idea, right? So if you have the opportunity to meet with someone one on one who's going to be a key stakeholder in something that you're thinking about or whatever, rather than bringing them a 5 or 10 page proposal, which, going back to one of the earlier slides, is this person's already super invested in this. How am I going to walk them back? Now I have a different conversation that I need to have. Just floating an idea, like I've sort of been thinking about this particular problem. Like, is that problem interesting to you? Right. One, you'll get more honest feedback, I think, because you don't seem as invested. And you're probably not as invested. You haven't spent as much time like detailing it out and thinking through it, believing that you have thought through all the angles. And therefore, when the feedback is, I don't think about that, that's not something that we would pursue for the following reasons, your ability to take that feedback is going to be much better. Right. And I think people are, how would I describe it? Generally, and your mileage may vary in your organization, but people are generally quite nervous about taking the time of executives and feeling like maybe they're wasting their time and there's like the pre-meetings and the preparation and whatever. But the reality, and again, I can only say this for myself and my fellow execs at CircleCI, but the reality is I would much rather get a really small idea early in order to have some opportunity to give some feedback and get it on the right trajectory than have to walk back something that people have invested a huge amount of time in. Right. And so building that kind of relationship, taking it was whatever, it could be coffee, it could be any reason, right? Like the water cooler chat, if anyone's still going to an office, whatever that might be, donut pals, if you do that, which is just like random meetups of people in your company. Um, Taking the opportunity to float small notions and get early feedback on them is going to, one, give you an opportunity to build a relationship with folks, two, have them feel like they participated somehow in sort of building out that idea, and three, again, give you an opportunity to just walk something back before you really put a lot of time and energy in it. Because if it's going to run aground early, um, I would invest as little time in it as possible because you've got other things to do, right? All right. So, next poll. Hopefully, people have examples for this. But the last thing that you tried that didn't work out, got stalled somewhere. Looking to get thoughts on where that might have gone wrong. Is there a persona or a particular character involved that prevented you from succeeding? All right, this one looks like it's slowing down. That's good enough. There's definitely, let me just share some leaning towards the skeptic, which makes sense. Makes sense, but a good spread. Um, and nobody's saying, "Yeah, I did all of this." So that's hopefully that's some good takeaways for folks as well. But a good spread, definitely leaning towards the skeptic, which I guess is not super surprising. People that are going to um, show up. And I guess, I mean, feel free to throw this in the comments or in the chat or whatever. But I'm curious if those people that folks are thinking of as skeptics are consistently skeptical or just happen to be skeptical of the thing you were trying to do. And if it's the former, then that tells you one thing, right? Like, how do I figure out how this person thinks? How do I frame things? What have they accepted in the past? Sometimes the only thing they accept is their own opinion, which I don't really have a great answer for, but other than inception, which is actually half joke, half real. Getting people to the point where they feel super bought in and feel like they created that direction as much as you did. Sometimes it feels like you really want to get credit for your work, and that can be frustrating. But on the other hand, if that's what it takes to get something done that's right for the business, it's not the worst approach. Um, but yeah, if anyone has any specifics on the skeptics, again, always skeptical or just skeptical of your idea. And then if it's just skeptical of your idea, is there anything that you learned? And feel free to put this in the chat. What I really want is for you to think about it for yourself. Is there anything that you learned from that exercise about how you would approach that person or someone like them? Um, and I guess, were you surprised that they were skeptical? Like, would you know who to address and whose skepticism to address in advance next time? That would be the thing that I would want you to take away from this. Uh, yeah, great question from Marco. I wish I knew if y'all could see the questions, but I'll just read it. So, how do I personally make space for people to engage with smaller thought balloons? I mean, I don't have a perfect answer. I think there was a there was certainly a point in my time at CircleCI when I learned that people were putting way too much energy into preparing to speak to me. It takes a lot of energy and effort to build those relationships with folks in the organization. I do my best to put that work in, but it's not evenly distributed across the whole organization. That's, and obviously depending on the size of your organization, that can be hit or miss. Um, and I also do my best to um, to put out that message. But I think that the more important thing for leaders um, is how you then respond, right? Like if someone has a great experience coming to you and asking for input on something, then they're going to tell their friends. And if they don't, and it feels really cumbersome, or they feel, I don't know, belittled, like pick an outcome that would be negative, then that word is going to spread, right? Like I think as a leader, you have to recognize that conversations are happening that you're not in, and mostly they're, like most of your reputation happens when you're not in the room. I guess that's true about everybody, but it's particularly true in that case. So, those are the things that I at least strive for. But I won't stand here and tell you that I'm perfect at it. I don't know if that question was aimed at how to do that for people that are under you, or how to figure that out for the people that are above you. I guess the other realization I've had in my whole career is most people are just people. I've met lots of people that I had, whether it's like famous people or people who are just like phenomenal in the particular thing that they do, or people that were just mythical for some other reason. Every time I get a chance to meet someone who seemed terrifying, I learned in the end that they were just another human being, and they had their own interests and their own faults. And just approaching them as a human being turned out to be the best way to handle that. All right. Um, so take some chances, I guess. Um, so I guess one quick thing to knock into the chat. I'm going to keep going because I'm keeping an eye on the time, and want to be respectful of all your time. But if you have something you're working on now that you've had a chance to think about this, is there somebody that you think if you got their buy-in, would be really helpful to sort of getting your next thing done? And if anyone has any specific questions about how to tackle that, then throw that into the chat or into the Q&A as well. Um, so yeah, I'm just looking for role. If I had the CFOs, but I mean, it doesn't even have to be executives. It could be wherever you are in your organization. Um, Security. That's a fun one. Feel free to elaborate on that one. I mean, in as much as you can publicly. Um, Product is a common. Okay, let's see. Mhm. Got it. Good spread. Good spread. Um, does everybody that puts something feel like they have a plan, a better plan for how they're going to do that? Feel free to write while I wrap up this section. I think we head into just a little bit of time for some discussion and Q&A. So, um, yeah, I often use, I'm trying to think of good metaphors. I guess at the end of the day, most decisions are not made in a giant meeting, um, where everyone sits around and talks about it and works it out, right? Like the conversations that go well, the work has already been done. And so, um, there's like long-term effort here, which is building those relationships so that when you need them, you can go have that conversation really easily. Um, or working through the people that you do have good relationships with to get the buy-in from folks. Like you might not know the CTO or the CEO. I'm just picking Albert's comment from the end there. You probably know them, but you might not have a good enough relationship, but you might have a great relationship with, you know, I don't know, principal engineer who knows the CTO really well. Right. And going to that person and saying, not just, would you support this, but, or alternatively, what will make me successful in this conversation, right? Like you have a great relationship with this person. How do they think? What sorts of questions are they going to ask? How do I, how do I make sure that I'm prepared for that conversation? Um, all the way back to communication format. Like, do they want slides with lots of text on them? Do they want me to write them a document that they can read in advance? Are they going to ignore it and just show up in the meeting and ask me why I'm there? Like, that happens, right? And if you spent your weekend writing a document that your CTO or CEO didn't read because they're busy and they didn't get it with enough time, or they just like to, freewheel and whiteboard, that can sort of throw you off your game a little bit. Again, I don't really want it to be that formal, but sometimes that's it, right? And so knowing their personality and how to interact with them is really valuable, and being able to ask someone who you do have a good relationship with to sort of ladder your way up there is a good strategy. So know who the characters are in your organization. Like, honestly, sit down and map it out a little bit. Who do I need to get, right? Who do I need to get to? How can I get to them? Those sorts of things. I mean, this is hang out with your salespeople. This is all they do all day long, assuming you have them. Also, you should spend time with your salespeople anyway, because they can tell you what people love and hate about your product. Um, yeah, and try to find the way to get those casual conversations, float your thought balloons, get early feedback. The more invested you are in something, the more disappointed you're going to be when it doesn't work out. And so if you get those signs early, you can either adjust to get it onto a track where you're going to get some support, or you can take that feedback and say, okay, well, this isn't the right thing for the business right now. What did I learn? What, given that information, what would I do that is maybe going to be a better thing for the business? As I said at the beginning, the goal is not to get the things done that you want done. The goal is to figure out what's going to be most impactful and get that done. Right. So it's a two-way street. You're a participant in that. Okay. So last sort of notion in here and how I think about these things and where I see people succeed. The first two you've got is this notion of like pros and cons, and how to present options. I would say my experience, again, your mileage may vary. Understand your own folks. My experience is that executives feel a sense of responsibility for decision making, and this can be very different in different organizations. Um, and so presenting a yes or no decision doesn't leave a lot of options, right? And when I often see things framed as pros and cons, they're like the opposite. The cons are just the opposite of the pros. So all I get is a list of reasons that this is a good thing to do. We should do this for the following reasons that make it good. Um, then I have to sort of figure out for myself whether I think this is positive or not. The other thing is that there's an unconscious choice that everyone is making today, which is to not do the thing, right? Most people aren't thinking about it, and therefore they're unconsciously, meaning unintentionally, deciding to not do that thing and haven't considered the impact of not doing it. So the way that I tend to reframe this is with options, right? One of the options is to do nothing, and then frame each of those options typically with some risks, right? This is the risk of of not doing anything. This is the risk of taking this approach. This is the risk of taking this approach. And I can compare those across. And then again, your mileage may vary. I'm going to say that a lot, but give a recommendation, right? Yes, I think most executives feel a responsibility to participate in decision making. But if you bring a recommendation, it feels more like you've done the work. And so this is an example, kind of going back to the event-driven architecture thing, a little less AI generated to try to make it real, but like, and trying to format a little bit around the customer impact, right? Like in right now, if we do nothing, we have a bunch of internal calls that are fragile, and that results in 3 to 5% checkout error rate, right? We're getting errors as people are trying to check out buying on our e-commerce platform, whatever that is. And so we currently have 4%. It's probably higher actually in a real business, but this would be a really good business. Nobody ever abandons their carts unless there's an error. But 4% customer cart abandonment. Like, that is a real business metric that we can talk about. And we believe that if we pursue a pilot where we focus on the domain of checkout, which is where the problem is, and we cap it in a particular size and we have some check-ins along the way, then we'll expect to see a reduction in cart abandonment down to basically never for errors, but just because some people abandon their carts, that actually happens. And that will give us also, this is meant to be a 10% increase in our innovation investment, because we're no longer chasing broken issues and dealing with incidents and getting on customer calls, et cetera. Or maybe we're probably not getting on customer calls if we're an e-commerce site, but you get the idea. And then there's like the all-in full adoption two-way door model, which is we'll get there faster to the end state, but we won't have the opportunities to off ramp and say, you know what, this actually isn't working that well. It's not producing the results that we wanted. So this is how we would go about that. We think we'll get again the whole thing there faster. More people will have increased space to innovate, um, but we've lost the off ramps. Therefore, our recommendation is we pursue option two. We do 30-day check-ins where we look at really how honestly, how are we doing? Are we seeing the impact that we expected? You have an opportunity as an exec to pull the shoot or like stop the project if it doesn't feel like it's having that impact. And we've thought about it. Now, I might present these ideas and have someone say, cool, but actually there's this way bigger business impact that I need you to go focus on. Like, yes, we have 4% customer cart abandonment, but it turns out, top of funnel, we're losing all of our customers right now because search isn't working because AI took over the world. Like, we need to go focus on that instead. That's great. I didn't have that context when I came to this discussion. I shouldn't feel bad about the need to go redirect somewhere else. I mean, it would have been nice to know that earlier, but now I know it and I can go do something with it, right? But laying this out, so that's like the weird option that, that's going to come up that you didn't bring to the table, but laying this out and then having someone say, actually, I'm 100% convinced, let's go all in because, it's not worth being cautious is also possible, right? Or can we take option three and get it done in less time? Like, what would it take to do that? I know there's lots of conversation that you can have about this because it's not, we do this or we don't. What not doing it looks like is understood, and what doing it looks like is understood. All right. We have about 60 seconds left, so I am going to skip this last poll. I'll just leave it up here so that you can think about it for yourself. Um, and because what I want you to take away is that you should think about those things and think about structuring, but think about how decisions get made in your organization, how executives want to be involved in those decisions, particularly this list of folks that you feel like you need to have buy-in from. Like, how do they think? How would they want to be involved? And then the last thing I'm going to do is just because I can get this perspective, which is how are you feeling now? And if you want to just throw some comments into the chat at the same time, that would be awesome. Still nobody in 5. Maybe next time. Come to a lead dev conference. We'll do this in person. We can talk more about it. Bring me your problems. See if I can help you. Awesome. All right, I'm going to end that one because we're at time. Hopefully that's helpful to y'all. It's been great hanging out with you. Hope you have a great rest of your day. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. All right, I'm not going to type in the chat, but you're all very welcome. It's been fun to hang out. And come to another one or come to a conference, as I said. Do some workshops in person. They're all super fun. All right. Thanks, y'all.